Hello and welcome to Author Nation. I am your host, Melody Ann. I'm also the founder of Author Nation, a community that takes you from idea to successfully published author. We know your goals, we help you meet those goals. And so if that's something you're really interested in doing in your life right now, becoming a successful nonfiction author, download our planning checklist. You'll find it at authornation.online. And that is in the description, and it is also scrolling past you right now. Today, we are talking about scripting a better story. We are talking about Hollywood dreams. And I know a lot of authors have Hollywood dreams. So my guest is #1 best-selling author, produced and award-winning screenwriter Tammy Gross. She's been working with screenwriters, newbies, and A-listers for over 12 years. Her award-winning screenplay, Evangelina, is also a best-selling novel slated for 2022 film production with an A-list Hollywood producer. A true believer that true stories change lives, Tammy helps difference makers bring their story to the world through speaking, coaching, blogging, bestsellers, sizzle reels, series, and film. Tammy has several nonfiction bestsellers coming out in 2022, including the 2022 Voices of Women compilation, F Your Script, screenplay format, and the win-win mindset for authors. Let's welcome Tammy Gross. Hi, Tammy. How are you today?
Hi there. I am so happy to be here. This is actually very exciting. I love talking about books. I love talking about true stories. I love nonfiction books. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And I love what you do. And I can't wait to dig into kind of what you do and how you support authors, because I know there are a lot of authors who dream of Hollywood. And so this is really important for them. But you actually started out as a musician, I understand.
I did.
Tell us about that. So tell us about the
Well,
beginnings there.
the beginnings there actually do kind of go toward the beginning. My dad was a musician, and I am kind of his carbon copy. My sister is sort of my mom's carbon copy, very stable, normal people. And then there's my dad and I. So it was evident early on that I had some musical. Well, it was evident to me that I had musical talent. The family thought that I was pretty loud and obnoxious, and they just tuned me out. But once they discovered, after I did this epic performance at a talent show, where it's like they looked at each other and they're like, she can sing. you know I always wanted to be a writer as well. And so we actually, I don't know if we sat down as a family, but somewhere along the way the family decided my fate. And we just kind of had this spoken and then long-term unspoken plan for me that I would sing while I'm young, and then I would write when I'm old. And so for 25 years, I was a singer, I was a songwriter, I was performing and arranging music for churches all over the world, and doing all sorts of things with music. And that was my life and everything. And I was doing some writing, and I took some college courses that got me, that put me in that field and everything. But apparently one day I turned old, because one day when I was taking a break from singing, I discovered this pirate museum. I'm not into pirate. I was never into pirates, but my sister was. So she brought me to this pirate museum, and I found out about these two female pirates that lived 300 years ago. They were real people, and I was so fascinated by it. I could just see their story on the silver screen, and I'm like, why have I never heard from them? And I guess I turned old that day, because I decided I was going to write that screenplay, and that was my new life.
I love that. I must have turned old that day, because that's what
Yep,
my parents told me was going to happen, right?
exactly,
That's so
exactly.
funny. That's so funny. And that book, The Treasure Galleons, right? I
hmm
love female pirates, by the way. So, I'm not a pirate fan per se, but I
Yeah,
love
I'm actually
stories of like women historically who kind of broke barriers,
right,
like,
right.
criminals and pirates and, doctors, and not always negative stuff, but I love those kind of break the barrier stories. They're so
I
much
mean,
fun.
it's exciting, right? It's really exciting, and it actually brought out my first book. But what's interesting is that my first book, it's not about the lady pirates. It actually, all that research brought me to a prequel, basically, I guess you could say. What brought us all those pirates that came 300 years ago and gave us the Pirates of the Caribbean, the real people who actually were the pirates, the Blackbeard, the Charles Vane, and John Rackham, or Jack Rackham as some people call him. And he was the one who hung out with these two lady pirates. And so to get to their story was a whole other story. And that's what I ended up writing a screenplay about, and turned it into a book, and now it's a bestseller. And yeah. And the rest is
So
not
what came
yet
first?
history.
So what
I'm
came
sorry.
first, screenplay
Mhm.
or book?
In my world, screenplay comes first, and that's how it's worked out. But that's also been one of the things that I've learned, that if somebody is ambitious and they want to get to the screen, they want to take this slightly smoother. It's not easier, because it's all hard. It is. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It is hard to write a story that is really good, that is going to capture imagination, that's going to endure. And when it comes to story structure, screenplays have very specific, parameters around them. There are certain, that scene that you love so much, they always talk about killing your darlings. Well, you have to really murder your darlings for screenplays, because you will have that favorite scene. And if it doesn't really move the plot, you only have that 2 hours usually, that at least in the traditional way of looking at film and screens and even TV, you have that parameter of, you've got your 2 hours that you've got to tell your story. And to get those emotions the way that they need to, we're not trying to manipulate emotions, but we are trying to lead people, on an emotional journey. And there is a format that works for the human condition, for who we are and how we consume stories. And of course, it's been changing over the years, but certain things are always the same. We always have that beginning, middle, and end, and we have that tight timeline that our
Yeah.
attention span, is going to keep us going with. So
Yeah.
in my opinion, starting out with something like that kind of constricts you a little bit and makes you get extra creative and really make sure that you're packing a punch with every scene and every dialogue and everything, is the way to go. Plus, you've pretty much got a 120-page limit. So you have 120 pages. So it's a lot easier to turn that 120 pages into that 300, 400-page epic, if that's what you want for a book, than it is to take that 400-page epic and turn it into a 120-page screenplay. So
Yeah.
that's the way I look at it. But
Yeah.
everybody has to work at whatever it is that they're comfortable with. And if you've
Yeah.
already written your book, or you're already writing it, there's no mistake involved there. That's
Yeah.
your journey. And you just
Yeah.
have to know that now you have a lot of darlings you're going to have to kill to get it into that screenplay format.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting, right?
Mhm.
And you don't have to turn it into a book afterwards, or you don't have to turn it into a 300-page book. It could be a 120-page book, but they're still
Exactly.
different, right? Because scripts, there's, your dialogue, for example, is a huge difference in a script versus a book, right?
Yes.
Because on screen, you get the visual and you get the dialogue. I mean, sometimes there's a narrator.
Hmm.
Sometimes, but generally
Yeah,
it's the visual
sometimes.
and it's the dialogue, right? That
Right.
moves it along. Whereas in a book, as an author, you can kind of forget the dialogue and narrate if you want, which isn't always
Yep.
the best idea, but you could if you wanted. So yeah,
Right.
obviously, excellent. So tell us a little bit about the book. So it's a prequel about the male pirates before the female pirates came into the picture. Is that right?
Yes. It's
Okay.
actually, it sets up everything, because well, here, I'll just show it to you. This is actually the first edition version, and it has like a little subtitle on it that's a little different than what's out there now. I don't have. I was waiting for the print. I have a book signing this weekend, and they're slow on it, so I haven't gotten them all yet. But anyhow, so this is it, and this is actually a picture that is really cool. It's actually a wraparound picture that shows the actual events of what happened. There was a hurricane that took out 12 ships, and this is in 1715, and this is along Florida's, what we now call the Treasure Coast. And this is why we call it the Treasure Coast, is because of what happened on July 31st, 1715. And in 2015 is when I actually published this book and sold it for the first time. So on the
Cool.
300-year anniversary. But what happened was, there, back then, there's a little history behind it. And I don't spend a lot of time working on the history. I just kind of tell the story and show it and everything, because I told it as a screenplay, of course. But you get some of the history as there's dialogue and as we show things. I don't use flashbacks. I'm not one of those flashback type person. Um, though I love movies that do that, actually. But in this story, we start out just learning that there are pirates in the waters and that there are also Spanish. So in this, the heroes are the Spanish, and which is a very different take on doing things. But I'm doing it from the perspective of people who were actually victims of this horrible hurricane that that gave us all these treasures that are on the treasure coast that people are still diving for. By the way, I mean there was about $400 million worth of treasure that were on these 12 ships that were leaving. They were leaving Cuba. That's where they had rendezvoused, but they had come from all over the world. Back then, there were just constantly ships going all the way from the New World to the Old World to bring treasures to Spain. The Spanish king was, he had coffers to fill, and that's where he was getting it. And I don't get political about, people's beliefs on the good and the bad of all that. It's just what it is. And it's the circumstance that these people are in when they're doing this. And so there were always other nations that were after the Spanish because they had all these treasures that they were taking, and so they were always trying to get after them. But it's very hard, and there were very few successful attempts to take a ship that had all this treasure. But boy, there were always people trying to do that. But this story is cool because it starts after a 14-year world war. So I don't want to get too much into the weeds of the story and everything.
No,
but
don't tell us the end. Don't just give us enough that we want to read it or see it. So
exactly.
And so tell me about the female pirates. Sorry?
That's what brought the female pirates. It's just that when there was all these ships and everything, that there was this 15-year war, and there had been no ships going all that time. I'm sorry. I just wanted to kind of wrap that up a little bit. So there were all these people who were out of work after 14 years of a world war. There was a total world war. It was really World War Zero, I guess you could say. And so that is what brought all these different pirates, including the female pirates, is when these ships wrecked, all of a sudden there was all this treasure at the bottom of the sea. Okay, there we go.
Don't apologize. That is so exciting. I love it. So tell me, so you wrote the script and now you're a musician with a script, right? I'm a musician with a script. So tell me a little bit about the journey of that your first experience. And then after that, I want to get into like how the lessons you've learned will help other authors. But like that first journey for yourself, what was that like?
It was an interesting time for me, but it makes it better for everybody now, I think, because this was back in 2008. Now, we had just had a writer's strike in Hollywood. I didn't know anything about Hollywood. I barely was aware of the writer's strike. I didn't care about any of that stuff. I was doing my own thing, and I was doing things with churches and all that kind of stuff when this happened. But like I said, I was on a break from singing because I was just kind of reassessing where I wanted to go with my next steps with my career. And it was a time when things were changing so that people like myself who had a story that they wanted to tell could actually find a way into Hollywood. There were new avenues that were opening up slowly, but they were opening up. There were new podcasts. There were different things. And now it's become like its own industry in itself. It's like it's the sub industry of Hollywood. And the coolest part of that, actually, by the way, is that, and I don't want to get too far into this because I don't want it to feel political in any way, but it really is for anybody, whether you're left or right or whatever. It's like the Hollywood machine is tough. It's a hard machine to get into. Now it's just all Marvel and Star Wars, right? So now there's independent stuff, and it all kind of started back then. So I came in at an interesting time when the doors were opening up, writers were on strike, or at least were coming back from strike or whatever, and you could learn from people who had been doing it, and then they helped you get your foot in the door, or helped you figure out how to get your foot in the door. And so things have been progressing over the last 12, 14 years from that. And now it's a industry of its own, but it's an opportunity that we just never had before. And that's what I had to discover. I had to navigate some pretty crazy waters to figure out, how do you write a screenplay? and learn about these. I mean, I went on my own epic journey. I actually was a victim of pirate descendants when I was doing my research on these pirates, and I was in the Bahamas, and crazy stuff was happening when I went around the world. I went to the Netherlands. I went all over the place into all these different archives trying to find out about them. That was my journey. But my journey of trying to figure out screenwriting was, I in the end, we all kind of come to the same conclusion that there's no rules in screenwriting, and yet you better follow the rules. That's what everybody learns in the end. That
Oh,
there's
that one
no
of
format
those,
rules.
right? Yes, there's nothing we can
Yeah,
tell you, but you better get it right. Yeah.
exactly. So
Oh my gosh.
it's an
But
interesting thing.
but you got it done, and I actually really
Mhm.
love independent film, and I also really love foreign film. Right, I love
Yes.
watching films in language that's not mine, because
Hmm.
it's like there are these cultural pieces, and there's so
Oh
much,
yeah.
it's so interesting, like how other cultures put films together, and how they see humor, and how they see fear, and how they see the storyline. I love it.
You're right.
And so,
Yeah.
was your movie optioned? And can you just explain that whole, like, what that is for people?
Yeah, well, that's kind of like the first big goal that a lot of people have is let's get it optioned. But everybody has their own idea of the best way to get there, and there's no wrong way, and there's no one right way. But that is one of the steps. And an option is basically where somebody uh, says, "I've read your screenplay. I love it. I want to help make it into a movie." It might be a director, might be a producer, might even be an actor. I mean, it could really be anybody who wants to put money on the line. And what they do is they pay you. And that payment can be anywhere from $1 to $1 million. I've never heard of a $1 million option, but there might have been. It's usually, you know, up into possibly into the tens of thousands, but usually it's in the $1,000 range to $5,000. That's pretty much it. And then that person now has, for whatever time that you put into your contract in the option, they have a certain amount of time to get things happening to get this movie made. And I actually have a movie that's in that situation right now. It is not the Treasure Galleons. Now, this is what what one producer called oceany. It's a very oceany thing, which means big budget. And I've even had line budgets done on it, and like the smallest at the time, although that was before some of the CGI got where we can do it differently now, was $12 million. So this is a $12 million story, and it's a hard sell because of that. Although there's a whole series that comes with it, on pirates, and takes us all the way to the American Revolution. But the one that I have optioned is actually a very simple, low budget. It's called Evangelina. This is my author's copy, so there's this weird little band across it. But this is a story that I actually only wrote in 48 hours. And I wrote it at a 48-hour retreat. I really believe in retreats where you have somebody guiding you, and where there is something, where there's like a really tangible thing at the end. And for this, it was write your screenplay in 48 hours. One of the problems I'd had before I finally finished this was finishing a huge script. I could do shorts, and I was doing okay with those, but it was really hard to get through a whole script and then get it to the point where it's like, where I felt like I was learning a lot. So this was back in 2013. Went on this, and it was a themed thing. It was at the haunted hotel where Stephen King wrote The Shining. So it was a perfect place to write a ghost story. So this is actually a ghost story. It has nothing to do with pirates at all. It was just a one-off thing. I was inspired by where I was at. I had a true story that I wanted to kind of find a new way of looking at. So it was inspired by a true story. It's not an actual true story. And I ended up finishing it in 48 hours, and I entered it into some contests. It won grand prize. So I by then I had known what I was doing, so I knew what I wanted to put on the page, but I got it on the page, cleaned it up a little, won some prizes, and then it's been optioned a couple of times. It's under option right now, and it's got kind of a Halloween theme. And so the producer, he was the producer of Bones for the entire season, a series of Bones, as well as Queen of the South. And now there's a new, what is it called? Shantaram. There's a new thing out on Apple called Shantaram, and he's a producer on that as well. He's amazing. He wants to direct this. He thinks it's a great story. He found it in a very roundabout way. Enter contest, because he found it through a judge who had read the script years ago, and he was looking for a story like that. So that's kind of another little tale that might help people If you're wondering how it gets into people's hands, it's by getting it out there, not by holding on to it and hiding it and thinking like somebody's going to steal my idea. That's not the way to get people to notice it. You get them to notice it by getting it out there, and that's what happened. And so it's in pre-production right now.
All right, so it's been optioned, and it looks like it's likely to go forward if it's in pre-production, right?
Yes.
The
Yes.
deal isn't signed and sealed yet, but
Right.
if it's in pre-production, then it's getting close. Like people are actually putting their toes on the line
Exactly. Yeah. And
for
he's been
this, which
spending
is
some money
a big
on
deal.
it. You know, he
Yeah.
paid me for the option, and he's put some money into it. You know, had some artwork done, has been talking to casting people. He's talked to people in some of the shows that he's worked on. It's like that they might be interested in playing one of the lead roles and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And then he also has to go out and find other money, right? So, this is the
Right.
budget. And so one person might option it, but they might bring in 3 producers who all put in a share of the money and then take the risk and also get the reward of it, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah. And then from
Exactly.
then they go and sign that deal with you. And then they kind of, they kind of take your script and then they get to do whatever they want with it, don't they?
Yes,
Like they
once
can
we
change
sign that,
things.
yeah, he can actually change it any way he wants even right
Yeah.
now. But then if that option runs out and we don't renew it, it comes back to me and I can start selling it to other people because he's just
Yeah.
not getting it done. And that could happen. That could still happen.
Yeah.
He's very gung ho. Talked to him a couple weeks ago, and and he's like all on board and everything. He's had some setbacks in his own personal life, and that happens. I mean, that just happens, right?
Oh,
He had
setbacks
kind of a
happen.
tragedy. Yeah, he had kind of a tragedy in his life actually, and so there was some emotional reeling that had to happen from that. Lost a stepson to a hit and run driver. So that
Mm,
was something that he had to deal with, and so I gave him a little bit of an extension. So we're going to the end of the year, and those are
yeah,
the kind of things that you decide at the time, and then when it does come time that they will or will not, you either get it back and you can start selling it, or you move forward and they pay you a certain amount that's in a contract. It's usually somewhere near the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. They have guidelines, and it's in the 55 to 75,000 range depending on what it is, if it's a movie or teleplay or whatever it is.
yeah,
And so then you sell it, and then yeah, you lose all your creative control, although you can put things in the contract that give you some stuff and back
yeah,
end stuff too.
yeah. And I just wanted to point that out because I know a lot of a lot of authors, they're very attached to their story exactly as it is. And so when they go to be traditionally published, they get really upset when the
Right.
publisher is like, well, that's not what's going to sell. This is, and so we're changing this and we're changing that. And they're like, no, this is perfect. It's my baby. And same with
Yeah.
scripts, right?
Yeah.
It's perfect
Exactly.
for you and it's your baby, but when you hand it over, you have to just say, okay, whatever they do with it, they do with it, and that's it, right?
It's a
So yeah,
different mentality. It is a different mentality and that's why for some authors it takes them a little while because they have to realize, okay, I have full control. I can do this all by myself as an author. And that can be a good thing on your end, but it can be kind of not a great thing because you'll see that when you watch like a film where it says produced by, written by, directed by, lead actor by, all that stuff, then you see that there's usually some kind of a quality issue because there's just not enough of that teamwork, and you have somebody who's making the decisions and is also in charge of too much of the creative control. And that can usually be, I mean, unless it's a super genius, which there are a few out there, usually that's a detriment. If you see, written, directed, produced by the same name, and then they're in the leading role as well, it's not always a good thing. And it's the same thing. That's what you're doing as a book writer, right? Is
yeah,
you're playing all those roles. It's a very collaborative thing, and it's a mindset that you need to realize this is good for you. It's good for you to come out of there are other creative people. You just have to make sure that you're aligning with the right people. You don't just sell it
yeah,
to the lowest bidder and that kind of thing.
yeah.
You just, or even the highest bidder, you sell it to the right people.
Yeah, you sell it to the right people and understand that the right people means that you need to let go and let them
Yes.
add their creative flavor to it to make it something that the viewers want to watch, right? So
Right.
just want to say that. So if you want
Yeah.
to learn more about Tammy, go to screenwriter.com. It is on the screen right now, and it is in the description. Tammy, I want to just kind of shift our conversation a little bit. So authors are watching and they're saying, okay, what do I do? What are my 3 first steps? What do I do? What would be
Yeah.
your advice?
Well, if you are interested in truly doing this, make sure that you get into a mindset. So I'm going to talk about thinking big. Yeah, you really need to kind of think big and have a plan. Especially if you've already written your book and that's where you're at. I can speak to people at wherever they're starting. But I think the typical track for this kind of thing, or track, I should say, for this kind of thing is that you would write your story in some form, maybe even just as a blog. I shouldn't say just, but as a blog, or as a short story, or you've already written your book and you need to really kind of expand some of the things we just talked about. Realize that, okay, you're going to go into a collaborative situation. You're going to have to give up some control. That's part of your growing, but also you're going to have to get some cojones and realize
Yeah.
that you are a writer. You created this wonderful thing. If you can sell this now, and you give over control, you still have you, and you can still write more. There's more that you can do. It's not like this is your only thing and you have to hold on to it so hard. So that kind of goes back to what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
But the big thing in thinking big is to believe in yourself, believe in the vision that you have for where this can go, for where your career can go. So it's not just this story. Of course, you have this passion for this story, and that's where it all starts. But if you have a plan for it, then you can be setting the foundation for doing more in the future and making more impact. So believe in yourself, believe in the project, and believe that it's worthy. Believe that your story is worthy, especially if it's your own story.
Mm-hmm.
You might say, well, there's no car crashes and, exploding buildings and chases in my story, so it's probably not cinematic. No, it's about an emotional journey. Even the action films, it's about the adrenaline that we get from watching it, right? And so your story probably does have a cinematic, you just have to figure out how to tell it cinematically. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So that's really big. And then and then you just have to make it all happen. So it's basically, I'd say, it's implement it. So I'm kind of doing the acronym of BIG, right? And you need to make things happen. You have to take action. You have to start writing that screenplay. You may not have to write the whole thing, but start writing it. And even if you're not doing it right by industry standards, at least get it going. Get yourself into writing mode for it, so that when you have a conversation with somebody, you have something to give them. You have the book, and you can say, and I've also, I have ideas for how we can, streamline it into a screenplay and everything. And they can say yay or nay to the screenplay itself, but they're investing in you and your story. That's what they're
Yeah.
investing in. So start implementing all that and making it happen. And then start finding ways to get paid. And there are ways to get paid before you even sell it. There is turn it into a bestseller, right? Enter contests. This is, to me, contests are great. Some people poo-poo contests and they think that they're all scams. But you know what? Who cares? Even if they're a scam, it's not a scam if you get feedback, genuine feedback from somebody. So that, in my opinion, you should enter contests where you do get feedback. But then, that's the only reason I ever entered any contest, is to get that feedback. I was craving people who I've never met. I want to hear from them, especially if I don't know anything about them. That's even better. It doesn't have to be a big Hollywood producer who's reading it. It needs to be somebody who would be like a viewer, So it can be a regular person. And if I've written it well enough, then they'll respond really well to it. And that's what I did. And I was winning contests. Well, guess what? There's money at the end of wins. Grand prizes. There's I think I won 2,200. I can never remember the number, but it's somewhere around $2,200. I think that I won for the first one that I won, and then I've won different prizes at different times. It can be as low as $5 and as high as $5,000. It's actually, there are some that are even more. You'll get your movie made if enter the right contest and win it.
Yeah.
And there are some that are more prestigious than others. But the gold that I always got back was the feedback. I didn't enter contests where I didn't get feedback. I didn't see the point. And that was that has been, and it continues to be, a really good strategy.
Yeah.
And that's how you can you can be getting paid for what you love to do before you even get it out fully to the world. You're doing all that behind the scenes work that has to happen to get it vetted. And you will be making changes. You'll get notes, and then you learn how to take notes. And like, it's like, okay, this person thinks I should turn this person into a green Martian. Why? Maybe that's a note that you can ignore. Depending on what it is. Yeah. So you learn a lot of lessons as you get it out there to other people, get people reading it, and have a plan. That's the main thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. So believe.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just do, you talked about big. Do you have the 3? Like, is that a?
Yeah, that's what it is. It's believe, implement, and get paid. Those are the 3 biggies.
Okay.
That gets you started. That gets you on a track where you're thinking about, I call myself the script. I can't say it. Nobody can say it. That's the problem. Don't call yourself something that's hard to spell or say, but I call myself the scriptpreneur.
Yes.
Cautionary tale. Don't call yourself that. But I do that on purpose because it's the creative and it's the business put together, right? And when you're creative, you do have to think about the business side.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I'm just going to break this down a little bit, going back to be and believe. And, so people watching this, they already have a book and they want to turn it into a script. And just to be clear, writing a script and writing a book are 2 very different things, right?
Very different.
So if you've got a book, you can't just go, okay, now I'm going to write a script. You either have to read a book about it or take a course about it, or at least look at a script to see like what it looks like and what the pieces of a script are, because it's not just, pull out the dialogue from the book and lay it out and then, say this happens in a forest, right? And this scene happens at a bank. There's a lot more involved. So part of believing in yourself, I think, is and what I always say whenever I'm struggling, it's like, Melody, it's not your skill set, it's your mindset. Because you can learn the skills, right? I can always learn the skills. And so in order to believe in yourself, one of the things you want to do are get the skills. So let's start there. What are some ways people can get the skills?
Well, for one thing, I have a book that's coming out, so I will make sure that I give you the information on that when it comes out. I have a book that is called, now my parents hate, and my mom and my sister, they hate the name of this, but it's called F Your Script. And it has nothing to do with the F word. It has to do with format. So it's how to format your script. It's also the philosophy, and I call that philosophy with an F, philosophy of the mindset of writing a screenplay, because there are all the things that we've already talked about. Plus, people are always asking, well, how do I do this? Thinking about where the camera is and production things that are going to happen with the story and everything. And that's the wrong question. How is not the question. It's why. Why does that need to be in it? Is it about the story or is it about the production? Because you're writing a story, even when you're writing a script. There are parameters, there are format guidelines, there are rules that the first rule is there are no rules, and the second rule is follow the rules. But but it's all about learning the basics of format. And I can actually teach you really quick. There's 4 things that you need in a screenplay, and this is all you need in format, is that you need a scene heading. And it just tells you where you're at. It's the location. It's whether you're interior or exterior, and it's like the lighting. Is it day or night? Those are the only things you need for a scene heading. So you have that as one element. The next one is the action. Now the action takes care of like kind of describing things. So it's also description. It's also kind of a narrative where it's telling you what's happening and everything. That's the action. And it's usually just like a couple of sentences here and there. It does not have to be huge paragraphs like it is in maybe a book, but it's just keeping you moving. And it's all in present tense, third person present tense. Everything is immediately happening right now. And then the next 2 elements are really kind of one and the same, because the third one is the character name. And that basically kind of puts the camera on that person just automatically. So that's all you have to know about that. You don't have to think about, like angle on or close up or anything like that. And then the dialogue that goes below that person's name. So really it's a character slug for dialogue. And they're really kind of the same thing. So really there's only 3 elements. That's all you need. There's so many other little things that people tell you. You need shots and you need these transitions, like cut tos and stuff like that. Nope, you don't need any of that. A scene heading is your cut to. So it's very simple. You can just, you can relax a little bit knowing that there are simple rules to it. And yet it gives you the freedom to just pay attention to the story, what they're saying and what they're doing. What we see and
Yeah.
what we hear, that's all we care about.
Yeah. And I think if I were to write a script, which I haven't, but if I were to, my guess is my action would be fairly minimal because,
Mhm.
if there's something one character must do in the scene, I will put that in the action. But,
Yes.
the director, in my brain, the director is making a whole bunch of decisions about where they're standing, where they're walking, what they're picking up, if they're sitting, if they're
Yes.
standing, if they're, so as the script writer, I don't actually have to take so much control and give so much detail that I'm taking away creativity from everyone else, right? It's just
Exactly.
give it the basics.
You're doing your reader a favor. So now your reader can be anybody. Your reader might be a director. Your reader might
Yeah.
be a producer, but your reader
Yeah.
is more likely to be, like the first person in a chain of people. And that is your gatekeeper, the dreaded gatekeeper that keeps your script from ever moving forward. Well, you need to impress that person. And the way to do that is you turn them into the director.
Yeah.
Exactly what you were just saying. You said that very well, where it's like
Yeah.
you just put what gives them enough to fill their own imagination with a movie,
Yeah.
and that makes them the director. They
Yeah.
decide, like you leave out rights and lefts, because if you're like telling people which way they're going and everything, you're getting into minutia that is not important until it's important. If it's
Yeah.
important, then you do it. Like if this person is right-handed, but he kills himself with his left hand, ooh, it's murder, not suicide,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Then it's important. But for the most part, usually those kind of details, it's like, nope, let the person figure it out for themselves. Let them tell their, show their own movie in their head.
Yeah, perfect. So bring your baby to the world, but let somebody else help the baby grow up, right? So give it the
Exactly.
basics and then let go. I love it. All right, perfect. And then implementing it. One thing I've had people do is not just contest, but also you can pay to pitch. And that can be really useful because you get feedback on that as well. So I know a few script writers, and one of the things I know most of them do is they go to pitch sessions where they pay to pitch, and the idea is that they are getting feedback and they're growing as script writers, because you're not
Yes.
necessarily going to write a script and then all of a sudden everyone thinks you're perfect and magical and you're now a Hollywood star because you had the right script writing from the beginning, right? And so
Right.
that's another way I think that might be useful. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, of course, like I said, there's kind of this whole sub industry that kind of was created in 2008 era, in that era. And so there are things like that. There's actually one thing that is missing, and that is this one big annual event that used to happen, and that's where I did a lot of growing, and I was able to go to these things, and that's where I was making some really good headway and meeting a lot of people. Good place to find agents and stuff. And it was a pitch fest, basically, and they don't really have that anymore. So the people who are doing that, they stopped doing that in about 2017. So we've got a little bit of a hole, and the people who have tried to fill it have not done a great job. In fact, there's one person who's a little bit stay away from. And so that's a little bit of a hole in the industry right now. However, there are people who are filling it with things exactly kind of like what you just described. That was an interesting way to describe it, is that you can basically pay to pitch. And so, you're going to pay for each one. It gets a little pricey and everything. We'll talk about it a little bit more maybe at the end, but what I'm trying to do is have a safe place where people can network and just
Yes.
can get together and be pitching every week. And whatever it is your project is, or if you're
Yeah.
somebody who helps people get stories out, that you can take these pitches and you can hear them.
Yeah.
And if you hear something you like, then you can always, so I like the idea of more regular networking, because it is
Yeah.
based on relationships, and a pitch just puts you in front of one person, takes a lot of money out of your pocket sometimes, and doesn't always necessarily, it may or may not be a fit. It depends on
Yeah.
how it's set up and everything as to whether there was already a good match to begin with.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to navigate there.
Yeah. And let's jump into that, because this is one of the reasons I invited you on the show. You do a weekly networking event, and it's so valuable. So can you talk a little bit about that, and who should go and how it's going to help them and what they can expect?
Well, it's been going really great. We started it, we only just started it on Labor Day, American Labor Day, September 5th, I think that was. And, or actually the day after is when we started. We kind of kicked it off and told people about it then. And so it's been a really great thing. We call it Real Connections Network, and we shorten it to Real Connects. And of course, Real is spelled REEL, but it's also about the real people and the real REEL projects that they're doing. But it's also for authors. And so it's really kind of for everybody who has a story that they want to get out to the world, and for everybody who has a way to help people get their story to the world. It can be for, marketers show up. We have independent documentarians. We have a lot of documentarians, which is great because we also have a lot of authors who show up who have their own story. I have to apologize for my intro. Sometimes that's the art of screenwriting also is I'm not pointing out that you tripped tripped. See, I'm doing now. I'm tripping on my own words. Tripping on words is usually the authors. That's not a reader error. That's a writer error usually. If there's
Yes.
tripping of words, right? So same thing in dialogue and everything. And so that's one of the things that you learn as you're doing the screenwriting is that you have to write it in a certain way that works for everybody. I had a point that I was going toward the real connections, but it doesn't matter. Oh, that will also, just the fact that real, REEL, CONNEX is what we kind of go by. So it's one of those things that's like, oh, that really works visually, but boy, when you try to say it and spell it, it's weird. But what we do there is we've been making some really good connections with people who have written books and who have their own story that they're trying to get out. And that's one of the words that you tripped over. That's one of the ones that's like, it's a different way of saying it, but difference makers. That's where I was going with it, is people who make a difference in the world, who have been through their own thing. I'll just tell you really quick. I know we're pretty much at the end, so I'll just give you this really quick here, is that every story can be boiled down to what I call kind of the W thing, where it's like, and this is so true of people who are making a difference in the world, where you at some point had some kind of a problem that you faced and you realized you needed to do something to solve that problem. And you started a journey. And on that journey, you did a lot of trying, and you probably did a lot of failing too. So there's a lot of falling down and everything. But then you got to that point where it's like, okay, I've got the solution, because usually somewhere in the trying and failing, there's like this epiphany. And most people go through some kind of a transformation. So you have your problem, you have this huge mountain of trying and failing, and then you have that epiphany and you have your solution. So you have this W. And a lot of difference makers, what they do is they see that mountain that they climbed, and they want to either help people they want to be the mountain guide, and they want to help people over that mountain so that they don't have to go through the same failures that they did to get to that solution, or they want to just wipe that mountain away completely and just give them a big victory, right? That's what a difference maker does. They take a W with a big mountain in the middle and they turn it into a victory. And those are stories that I think are very cinematic, and those are what are worth telling. And that's why Real Connections has been working great, because it brings people who have that W story that are making a difference in the world. Really quick, just quick example is there are two women who lost two sons, and they have written books. One of them actually has a documentary about her life, and now she wants to turn it into a movie. The other one also wants to make it into a movie, but she's made a trilogy from the point of view of her first son, and then her second son, and then herself with the grieving process. And both of them are now out in the world helping people go through grief and helping them work through it. And they're making a huge difference. And that is so cinematic and movie worthy. And they've both met documentarians as well as producers who want to help them get that movie out to the world. That's Beautiful. The kind of thing that we're doing. And it's free. It's free. We just want people to show up, tell their stories. And we also have fiction writers. We have the zombie apocalypse writers as well. We have people who do everything. Fun. Yeah.
What day
and
time
then we have somebody here. Sorry, what
day and what time?
Okay. That's at Tuesdays, and it's at noon Pacific time. So it's great for the Hollywood person who does it on their lunch hour. We just do it. We're just meeting for an hour, and we give everybody a chance to speak. And it's noon Pacific time, and so it's 3 p.m. Eastern time.
Perfect.
On Tuesdays.
Yeah, per Tuesdays noon Pacific. And we'll put the link to that in the description as well. But you also have a map to Hollywood for authors. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, everything I was talking about with having a plan and everything, there is no one right way, but there is probably a good way that kind of stands the test of time. No matter how much things change, one thing that doesn't seem to change at all is having IP. having that intellectual property that takes you out into so many different directions. You know, we're talking to authors, we're talking to screenwriters, we're talking to bloggers, we're talking to people who just who do audio things, podcasts and things like that. So everybody who is somewhere in their journey to get their story out can find a place on this map. This map is basically the steps that you can take where you can start speaking about, you can become a speaker and start find a way to have your own little inner script that you can share with the world in 2 minutes, in 5 minutes. You know, I started with a pirate story. I don't remember, I think I told it in about 4 or 5 minutes. And so that was my 4 or 5 minute version. You know, I've done it in 30 seconds. I've done it in, you know, in an hour if they wanted to know all the details. And then you keep moving forward and you turn it into a screenplay. And with that screenplay, you can start getting the vetting done. You can start getting into contests and you can start winning and actually getting some money if, you know, if that's super important to you. But even if it's not, hey, it's great. And that vetting allows you to say, hey, I have an award-winning screenplay that I'm now turning into a book. On the back of both of my books, so it's very hard to see it on this particular one, you can see that I put, you know, all these laurels of how it won all these different awards and everything. That's, you know, very helpful when you go to publish it as a book. But it was also a lot easier to take that 120 page, turn it into 300 pages or whatever. These are actually very thin, very short to read. And so that's part of the journey. And then the next steps, you know, you get into marketing and promotion and into distribution, not even distribution, into financing. Obviously, somebody has to make this movie, right? So it takes money to do that. Usually, you can do it on a zero budget, depending on circumstances. So that's what the map is all about, is to help you figure out all that stuff, what your steps are, and then what your next step is after you figure out what your plan is.
That's amazing. And I love the 2, right? I should get the map. I should look at that. And then I could come to the Tuesdays at noon to,
Absolutely.
you know, follow up on that and work through that and whatnot. Right. So that is amazing. Thank you so much, Tammy, for joining me today and giving out this amazing, you know, the map and the opportunity for people to meet you on Tuesdays and just work through it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thrilled. All right. For everyone out there watching, thank you for joining us today. Author Nation is here to help you go from idea to successfully published book. You can join us at authornation.community anytime you want. We have lots of fun events and lots of fun events and lots of great learning as well. So next week, join me because we're going to be talking to Sandra Nomoto about her business book. It's an incredible story. You don't even want to know how many people she interviewed. We're going to find out next week. So join me then. I look forward to seeing you then. Happy week until then.